Prison power. Inmates orchestrating crime outside while locked up. The first phone call came about midnight. Deep in his cell, under the dim flicker of the overhead light, Big Mike Lopez, dialed a number on a smuggled cell phone. His voice was calm, precise. "Tonight's the night," he said. On the other end, his outside contact nodded and replied, "We're ready." Then came the burst of tires, the crack of a window, the scream of a startled driver, and bullets echoing into the night. A luxury car in a quiet New York suburb was blocked in an alley, and dozens of rounds peppered its body. The target escaped, wounded, but the message was clear. Lopez's orders had been carried out, and while he sat behind solid steel bars in a medium security prison, his reach was far beyond those walls. He had pulled the strings. He had the power, and the authorities did not know how far the web stretched. How had this happened? How could a prisoner, locked up and serving time, still orchestrate a daring shooting in one of New York's suburbs? That question hung like a shadow over the next steps of the investigation. The story of Michael Lopez began years earlier when he first got involved with the street gang known as the East Harlem Kings. Growing up in Queens, he knew violence, poverty, and survival. By his 20s, Lopez was running small drug deals, collecting money, managing lookouts. He climbed his way up. He earned trust. He made alliances. Then came the big one, a multi-state cocaine ring. He was indicted, tried, and sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. The sentence was meant to silence him, to take away his freedom. Instead, it added a new layer to his domain. Behind bars, he found the tools. A contraband smartphone slipped in by a corrupt visitor. Coded letters passed around by another inmate. Whispers over the ventilation shafts. With a few trusted men on the outside, and inside, he reassembled his empire. He directed shipments, ordered collections, and gave one chilling directive: take out the weak ones. The parking lot shooting was that directive in action. Prison officials watched him. They saw the incoming letters. They saw the unusual calls. They thought they were monitoring it. But they underestimated how deep his network was. Because when you imagine someone locked up, you think powerless. Not Michael Lopez. He was the exception.
Now the investigation was in motion. Detectives combed through CCTV footage from the scene. They traced who rented the car. They pulled the phone records. Each lead pointed to something unsettling. The orders had traces back to a phone number linked to Lopez's wing of the prison. They found a crumpled letter in his cell. Phase 2 begins. Clean it up. The handwriting matched. The investigators realized this was no one-off. This was a part of something larger, something built inside the prison walls. Inside the corridors of the prison, guards walked past Lopez's cell door. Small talk, meal times, exercise yard. Lopez said quietly, playing cards with other inmates. Talk of sports, of lawyers, of appeals. Normal prison life. To the casual observer, he was doing time. But at night, quiet night, he was active. The watchers were watching the walls. Lopez was watching the system. The investigators now faced a choice: go after the shooter in the alley and miss the puppeteer in the prison, or dig into the prison, confront the possibility that the inmate they thought was contained was actually a kingpin. The longer they waited, the stronger his grip seemed, and the more dangerous he became. As they prepared to move in, to raid cells, seize phones, isolate inmates, they didn't know Lopez had already anticipated the move. In his cell, he leaned back and smiled slightly. He whispered into the phone, "Phase 3 starts soon." The walls were closing in, but for Lopez, they were just another stage. And now, detectives were about to cross a threshold they had never crossed before. What they would find inside, that remains the question. The investigators leaned forward, eyes locked on the glowing screen of their laptop. There it was, a ping at 2 a.m., a short burst of data from a phone number traced to cell block C12 at the Federal Detention Center. The message read, "Pick up tonight, West Side." Within hours, police in Queens intercepted a loaded van heading toward a shipment of cocaine. They pulled over the vehicle, found kilos in the back, and arrested the driver. But the driver only had a phone number and a name, Mike. Behind the call, Mike was sitting in his cell, 10 feet underground, hands cuffed, bars on the door. Yet the operation he controlled was very real. Detective Ramirez stared at the registration of the van, then at the phone records. They matched. The number was registered to the detention center's wing, where Big Mike Lopez had been for over a year. He was supposed to be locked up, removed from the streets, powerless. Instead, he had used a contraband cell phone and coded letters to order drug pickups, assign crew members, schedule drops, and move money. Inside that cell, he smiled. He was still winning. And the authorities were just waking up to the realization they were chasing the foot soldiers while the king stayed in his cage, watching, planning, and thriving. What happened next would not only expose the depth of Lopez's network, it would expose the prison system itself and show just how far an inmate could stretch his influence.
Back when Lopez first entered prison, he thought his power had ended. He was arrested after a long investigation into the East Harlem Kings gang. He pleaded guilty to drug trafficking, was sentenced to federal time, and taken to a medium security facility. The prosecutors assumed with him off the streets, the gang would falter. They were wrong. From the beginning, Lopez refused to show fear. He made friends with certain inmates, observed how communications happened, how guards walked, how visits worked. He built trust with a few key men, a corrupt guard who looked the other way, a visitor who smuggled in phones, and other inmates who carried messages out. He built a system inside the walls. The contraband cell phone was the heart of the system. Hidden during a visit, passed through wings, eventually in Lopez's hand. He used it to send texts, video chats, voice calls. He told his crew outside when to act. Tonight, he typed, "We hit the warehouse. Sunday noon, tag the driver." His phone pinged. Outside, crew members mobilized. Inside, Lopez sat quietly in the yard, tossed a football, made small talk. Normal. But in reality, his mind was active. Soon, the business grew. The jobs weren't just pickups and drops. He handled collections from various street corners across New York and New Jersey. Money came in. He lavished his family outside with cash. He invested in apartments, cars, front businesses to launder his profits, all while locked in a cell with guards on one side, concrete on the other. Meanwhile, the investigators uncovered the path. They found the phone records, traced the money through shell companies, watched the vehicles registered to fake names. They connected letters folded into thin sheets of paper hidden beneath mattresses. One letter read, "Greenlight West Dock, crew ready." They found the dock was a parking lot near the bridge, where a van unloaded bricks of cocaine. The green light came from Lopez's cell. Inside the prison, the system was quieter. Guards noticed more visitors, more packages, more unusual phone pings. Some guards reported suspicious behavior, but felt powerless. Administrative delays, distrust, corruption, all gave Lopez openings. He used the timing of counts and shifts. When the yard emptied, he used hidden earbuds to talk. When mail arrived, coded messages slipped through. One time, he whispered, "Team moves at 5, shift begins." The guard heard whispering, but dismissed it as idle talk. The clash was imminent. Investigators prepared a major raid outside. Search warrants, surveillance cameras, undercover agents. Simultaneously, they gripped the prison side. Tech specialists ready to monitor inmate calls, guards ready to sweep cell blocks. They timed the raid to coincide with Lopez's instructions to go live.
As the crews outside approached the warehouse, lights flashed, sirens roared. Inside the prison, Lopez's phone lit up. He was receiving updates. Driver caught. Jake escaped. The system cracked. The inmates in his network panicked. Back at cell block C12, Lopez's door was opened by 2 guards. They couldn't know if he was asleep, playing cards, or reading. But the call had come, the walls were closing in, and Lopez, the king inside, realized his world was under threat. The next move would decide everything, whether the network would crumble or whether Lopez would disappear back into the system, free inside his cell, still pulling strings. Sirens blared through the quiet streets of Queens. Officers swarmed the warehouse. Looted packages of drugs were scattered across the pavement. Outside, Lopez's crew was caught in a chaotic scramble, running in every direction. One man ducked behind a dumpster. Another tried to jump into a car, only to be pulled down by waiting police. Every move was tracked, every escape attempt blocked, and all of it had been triggered by the contraband phone sitting in a prison cell more than 10 miles away. Michael, Big Mike Lopez, leaned back on his narrow bunk, fingers tapping lightly on the worn sheets, eyes closed. He was calm, composed. The storm outside was still under his command. But his calm would not last. Investigators had been patient. They had watched, traced, and waited. And now they moved to the final stage, entering his cell. The guards outside C12 walked slowly, steps echoing down the corridor. Lopez glanced at the small camera above the door, noting how far away the investigators had positioned their surveillance. Every second was a test of his control. Every second counted. Months of planning, manipulation, and silent communication had brought him here. Back when he first entered prison, he had faced the walls, the locks, the uncertainty of life behind bars. He had thought confinement would strip him of power, but it had only forced him to adapt. He used the chaos of the prison system to his advantage. Corrupt staff turned a blind eye. Other inmates carried coded messages, and the contraband phone gave him eyes and ears in the outside world. Orders for shipments, warnings about rivals, and collection of payments flowed through him as easily as if he had never left the streets. The network he built was precise, efficient, ruthless. Detectives and federal agents knew it now. The prison was more than a containment facility. It was a hub of a sprawling criminal empire. Every confiscated phone, every intercepted message, every coded letter revealed only fragments of the operation. They realized that Lopez had built a system that was both invisible and unstoppable, as long as he remained calm and patient.
Inside the prison yard, life continued as normal for everyone else. Inmates jogged, played basketball, argued over card games. Guards made their rounds. Lopez appeared ordinary, lean, quiet, watching the clouds float past the bars. But behind that calm exterior was a mind at work. He was calculating, anticipating, and adapting in real time. Every raid, every bust, every phone confiscation was a puzzle to him, a challenge to overcome. His empire was flexible, resilient, and most importantly, untouchable. At least, that was his belief. Outside, the street crews were scrambling. The raid had caught some, but not all. Lopez's instructions had already accounted for contingencies. One associate diverted a shipment to a different location. Another called a safe house to hide evidence. The investigation had disrupted operations, but it had not ended them. Lopez's reach remained extensive, and the authorities were beginning to understand a chilling truth. Walls and bars could slow him down, but they could not stop him. The tension in the prison reached a breaking point when the cell door finally opened. Guards entered, flanked by investigators. Lopez's calm gaze met theirs. "Everything okay?" he asked, lightly, as though speaking about the weather. They had no idea of the web he had built. He smiled faintly, recognizing the game they were playing, the attempts to unmask him. Yet he had prepared for this moment for months. Plans within plans, distractions, and coded messages ensured that even if they searched him now, only fragments would be found. The real network remained hidden, invisible to even the most determined eyes.
As the search continued, Lopez leaned back and allowed himself a small grin. He had survived years behind bars. He had survived rival gangs, prison violence, and corrupt officials. And now, with his network intact and his influence still spreading beyond the walls, he was untouchable, at least for the moment. The authorities walked out, files and confiscated phones in hand, believing they had crippled a criminal empire. But Lopez knew better.
He had already adapted, already shifted operations, already sent instructions to new contacts. The empire was alive, and the king remained in his cell, silent and in control. As the sun set over Brooklyn, the lights of the prison flickered. Behind bars, a man with a long record, a lifetime of crime, and a network spanning miles of streets, leaned back and watched the shadows dance across the walls. For Lopez, confinement was never the end. It was only another stage in a life built on power, influence, and survival. And for the investigators outside, the haunting truth was this: some prisoners never stop controlling the world beyond the walls. They remain invisible, untouchable, and terrifyingly effective. The story of Michael "Big Mike" Lopez is a warning. Behind bars does not always mean powerless. And in the quiet of a New York night, the empire inside continues to watch, plan, and wait for the next move. If you want more true crime story documentary for United States, #USA without friction, don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment.